Right now in the Middle East, we're seeing two global powers completely rewriting the rules of influence. And they couldn't be more different. One is loud, it's disruptive. The other, super quiet, methodical. This is the story of what happens when they collide. A clash that, honestly, could reshape the entire global order.
And that really brings us to the central question, doesn't it? Who actually gets to write the rules in a world that's changing so fast? The old alliances are fraying, new powers are rising, and that playbook that governed things for decades, it's basically being thrown out the window. So the big question is, who's going to write the next chapter?
Well, it turns out the Middle East is the main stage where we're seeing two very different answers to that question play out in real time. You've got one approach that's loud and aims to transform everything overnight, and another that's quiet and, well, methodical. So let's dive in and break them both down.
Okay, first up, let's talk about the disruptor. We're looking at a really bold, top-down initiative from the United States, led by President Donald Trump. It's called the Board of Peace, and its goal is huge, to fundamentally reshape how regional conflicts are managed.
And right away, you can see the controversy. This quote from a diplomat, which came via Reuters, just gets straight to the heart of the matter for a lot of folks in the international community. They're asking, is this a practical new way to get peace, or is this basically an attempt to build a whole separate power structure that could, completely undermine the UN?
Okay, this is where it gets really interesting. Look at the huge gap between what this board was supposed to be and what it's trying to become. The UN Security Council gave it a mandate, right? But that was super specific: oversee stability and reconstruction in Gaza, and only until the end of 2027. Temporary, limited. But then you look at the board's actual charter, and it doesn't even mention Gaza. Instead, it talks about being a permanent global body, a more nimble and effective peace-building force for conflicts all over the world. That's a massive difference.
So how does this thing actually work? Well, the power structure is, let's just say, it's highly concentrated. The first chairman, President Trump, has the final say on every single decision. He can even pick his own successor. Getting in, it's by his invitation only. And yeah, they have a voting system, but at the end of the day, the chairman can veto anything. The key takeaway here is that all the authority is centralized in one place. Oh, and if you're a country that wants a permanent seat, get ready to write a big check. We're talking over $1 billion in just the first year.
As you can imagine, the global reaction has been, well, mixed is putting it mildly. On one hand, you've got a lot of nations, especially in the Arab world, who are praising this as a real, unique opportunity to finally end the conflict in Gaza. And you've got countries like Hungary and Vietnam officially signing on. But then, on the other hand, you have Western diplomats who are seriously worried this could weaken the UN. Israel has its own objections about who's on the committee, and Palestinian groups are deeply mistrustful. So, from day one, this plan has created strong allies and, at the same time, very strong critics. All right, let's pivot to our second story, because this is where things start to connect. While the US is pushing this big, disruptive model, another huge power, India, has been playing a totally different game. We're going to call it the consolidator's approach. It's quiet, it's patient, and it's all about building these deep, lasting partnerships all across the region. So the core of India's whole strategy comes down to this one key concept: strategic de-hyphenation. Sounds complicated, but it's actually pretty straightforward. What it means is that India deals with rival nations, think Arab states, Israel, Iran, completely independently. It builds these strong, one-on-one relationships that aren't tangled up in all the regional drama. This is a game changer because it lets New Delhi be friends with everyone, making it look like a super stable and reliable partner in a pretty chaotic neighborhood.
And believe me, this isn't just some abstract theory. Take a look at the diplomatic blitz they pulled off in 2025. I mean, it's relentless. In April, you've got a big strategic meeting with Saudi Arabia. A month later, in May, they lock in a massive, $78 billion gas deal with Qatar. Then fast forward to December, and they're doing back-to-back visits to sign deals in Jordan and Oman. What this really shows you is a consistent, high-level push across the whole region. They're not messing around. So, does this quiet, long-term approach actually pay off? Well, the numbers really do speak for themselves. Just look at the trade with a key partner like the UAE. It's just skyrocketed, going from $50 billion back in 2021 to a projected $85 billion in 2024. That's not just growth, that's a fundamental shift. India is transforming from just being a customer buying oil into a genuine, indispensable economic partner.
And this is so important to understand. It's not just about the money and the trade deals.
India is weaving this incredibly complex web of interdependence. We're talking partnerships in defense, joint energy projects, like for green hydrogen, and they're also tapping into these deep cultural and historical connections. At the end of the day, it's all about building a foundation of trust that's so strong it can survive pretty much any regional shock that comes its way.
So we've got the disruptor and the consolidator, both operating on the very same stage. But what happens when their two very different paths finally cross? Well, this is where our story really hits its climax.
And boom, here it is. India, the master of this quiet, long-game consolidation, gets a formal invitation to join the US-led Board of Peace. Just like that, these two totally parallel strategies have officially intersected. And that forces a huge, critical decision.
Now, to really get why this is such a big deal, we need to talk about something called IMEC, the India, Middle East, Europe Economic Corridor. This was a massive project announced with a ton of fanfare back in 2023. The whole idea was to link India to Europe right through the Gulf. But then conflict broke out, and the whole thing just stalled. And we're not just talking about another trade route. This is a strategic game changer, meant to make global supply chains way faster and more secure. And look who the partners are: the US, India, the EU, and the exact same Gulf states India has been working so hard to build trust with. Now with the Gaza ceasefire, IMEC is suddenly back on the table. And this perfectly illustrates the new reality we're in. A project as ambitious as IMEC, which could be blueprint for all kinds of future global cooperation, simply cannot happen without both of these powers. It needs the high-level political muscle that the US can bring with something like the Board of Peace. But it just as badly needs the deep, on-the-ground trust and the economic partnerships that India has spent years carefully building with countries like Saudi Arabia and the UAE. Suddenly, the disruptor and the consolidator, they might actually need each other. So what does this all mean? Where does this leave us? This intersection of two incredibly powerful and really competing strategies forces us to pull back and ask a much, much bigger question about the future of the global order itself. So will these two playbooks, the American model of bold, top-down disruption and the Indian model of patient, ground-up consolidation, will they find a way to work together? To complement each other and build something genuinely new for global trade and stability? Or are they just fundamentally incompatible? Are we just watching the beginning of a whole new kind of competition over who gets to write the rules of the 21st century? That is the ultimate question.